Like when you come into a CIO and you communicate that you really understand the problem set that they are dealing with, you have elevated yourself way above the rest of the sales reps in the industry. Because if you can communicate in a way that shows empathy for me, that understands the problem, the way I'm feeling this problem, and you sort of set yourself up as I'm an expert on this problem, you're speaking my language, I'm going to listen to you.
Welcome to this month's episode of the Fireside Chat, and I am excited today to have a former client with me, Bill Russell, and Bill and I worked together. Can't believe it. It was 11 years ago when I was at Salesforce and you were at St. Joe's. Can you believe that?
No, I can't actually. It's kind of amazing. I've gotten older. You have not. It's amazing.
It's all the sun I get. You can see I'm red from sitting outside all day. It does wonders for you. Let me just give Bill's bio real quick and then we'll dive in. So Bill is currently known for his influential role as the CEO and founder of Health Lyrics and as the founder and host of This Week in Health IT podcast. In his role at Health Lyrics, he leverages his extensive experience in healthcare IT to provide executive coaching and advisory services to healthcare leaders, a lot of whom are leading IT teams, startups, and investors. His podcast, This Week in Health IT, is a platform where he shares his insights and experiences and engages with other leaders and innovators in the healthcare industry. And before these endeavors, Bill had a significant tenure as the CIO for St. Joe's Health, where we worked together, which is a 16-hospital system valued at $6.5 billion. They had around 20 to 25,000 employees when I was there, and I think they got acquired by Providence during that time period. During his time at St. Joe's, he played a pivotal role in accelerating the adoption of new IT strategies and methodologies such as cloud technology, agile development, and innovating in the healthcare space. And his first big deal he did together was bringing in Salesforce to St. Joe's over 10 years ago with 20,000 employees using Salesforce to connect in the staff hub environment and collaborate in the mobile, social, digital era. So welcome, Bill, man. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you as well. It's interesting. We're both in completely different things than we were when we met all those years ago. It's kind of fun to see where you've gone with your career.
Thank you, man. It's nice to see what you're doing. And it's so similar in many ways. You're coaching, you're advising the person that you once were, and I'm doing the same for the person that I once was.
Yes, I am aggressively downwardly mobile, except, so that's the other thing about what I've decided to do. In the beginning of my podcast, I always say, my name's Bill Russell. I'm a former CIO for a 16-hospital system. And the reason I do that is I brought in a consultant at one point, and he kept badgering me. He's like, why should people listen to you? Why should people listen to you? And I finally said to him, because I'm the only idiot that was making close to 7 figures a year that has become a podcast host making less than 6 figures a year. And he goes, yeah, you should start your podcast with that. That's pretty intriguing. I'm like, all right, I'll figure something out, but I'm not going to start with that exactly.
You can't tell people that. Well, I'm just curious, how do you I know you ran your own business, I think before St. Joe's, and now you're back doing it. I'm just curious on a personal level, entrepreneurial side versus working for a big company, there's a reason you came back. How do you like the other side and this thought leadership space?
This is the third business I've run. I've grown a couple. I sold one, I closed one down, and then this is the third one. I like it. I mean, because you can build it. So we now have 12 people. It's a perfect culture. It's a great culture of people that I'm working with. I get to hire my 2 girls work for me, and they're exceptional. I've hired some friends, and we've just created this phenomenal culture. And it's what our business is about. And the reality of being anything in a large organization is the politics will kill you. And it did. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll get into that for sure. But let's start by recapping a little bit of what we talked about on the pre-call. You mentioned CIOs are extremely busy. They're very hard to get in front of. And I'd love you to just give sellers an idea of what a typical day in the life of the CIO looks like.
Okay. I mean, I'm gonna load you up with cliches here. There is no typical day, of course. I'm going to speak from my experience, which is healthcare, and let's just say in a top 100 to 200 health system, so those large health systems, the healthcare CIO typically has over 100 active projects. And sometimes I say that in a meeting and the CIOs will go, 100, man, that's small. We have 250 going. Okay, so you have 100 active projects going. You have multiple data centers, tens of thousands of endpoints, 900 to 2,500 applications that they need to keep running, 7 by 24, 365. And if they just get, the problem with that is you think, oh, that's the job. That's the important part of the job. It's not. Like, you need to get that to run without paying attention to it. Because if you pay attention to that, you're a short timer in that role. You have to immediately move on from getting that functioning, systems, processes, and all that stuff, so that you can move on to solving the challenges that healthcare faces. All that while doing things like making sure you have enough resources for your team. You have to build coalitions in order to get projects done. You have to provide air cover for different things that are going on. You have to be innovative for the industry. So, my days started, I'll close with this. My days started at roughly 5:30, and they usually ended with a dinner with someone like you, and or at least someone other than a family member. My day could start with just going through my emails and prioritizing things for the first couple of hours till people started showing up, and then my meetings would start. And I'd start. My first meeting would be about imaging. My second one would be about cancer treatment and oncology and their workflows. The next one would be about supply chain. The next one might be about the cafeteria staff and they need a new point of sale system. The next one might be about my budget. The next one might be about M&A activity. The reality is it's an incredibly broad role. And you are broad, if you're a good CIO, you're brought in to talk about all sorts of subjects, all sorts of topics. And you don't have a lot of time to focus on any one thing. You have to stick and move, because that's just the nature of the job.
So given the amount of projects and topics and demands, how do you prioritize? Or I should ask more directly, what is top of mind? What are the top buckets that CIOs care most about, given they're being pulled in so many directions, especially now in 2024?
Yeah, again, keep in mind, $6.5 billion health system at the time. So about 700 people reporting into me, about 100 contractors reporting into me. There were areas that I had to clean up and get functioning well, and then hand them to the VPs. I had a VP of infrastructure and operations. I had a VP of essentially consumer experience, both our external and internal consumers, VP of applications. And so if we had a problem in our data centers, which we did, when I came in, our data center had gone down 8 times in 6 weeks. It's one of the reasons I got the job, is I solved that problem as a consultant, and then they made me interim, and then they made me full time. But we had to redo the entire architecture. We had to redo all that stuff. You have to get that stuff and then hand it off, because what the organization expects you to do, they expect you to have a deep understanding of the industry, a deep understanding of the organization that you're in, the values, the mission, the strategy of the organization you're in. And then they expect you to have a deep understanding of technology and the trends in technology that are going on. And you're the person they're looking to weave all those things together. You get stopped in the hall and they say, hey, can generative AI do this? And you have to be ready to answer. You have to be ready to say, hey, yeah, I don't think generative AI is ready to do surgery yet. Or, can it do summarizations? Yes, it can do summarizations. However, the problem is it's not 100% accurate yet. Therefore, we have to have other models that are going to make it 100% accurate. And so, you're just constantly, they expect you to live there. They don't want to hear you talking about routers, hubs, switches, crack units. That stuff is in the background. That should never come up in any of the meetings you have once you leave the IT department. And that's where they want you to live, is where they're living.
So in that realm, how do you stay intelligent, and how do you stay abreast to, the evolving trends and be able to address that? And my second two-part question, my second part is like, with vendors, when it comes to vendors, do you rely on vendors, or do you want vendors to educate you in certain areas, or is that too biased? I mean, that's what we teach on, is teach the customer something new instead of trying to pitch them something about your product or service. So I'm curious kind of how you think about that.
Yeah, so there's vendors and partners, right? So I came in after following a Perot outsource. Perot became Dell. Dell was in there, and we had, as part of our agreement to go away from them, I think we had to spend like $15 million a year with them. They were a partner. Every time I had a problem, they had an office, and I would just walk in and say, "You guys do anything around this?" And so there were certain partners that we had. Cisco was a partner. I mean, obviously there was partners on the medical side as well. We had EHR partners, we had PACS partners. So partners are a great source of information if your staff isn't, right? So your staff is one, partners are another. The other is the global community of CIOs. You rely on them pretty significantly. There are behind the scenes emails that you never see. For me, I could send an email to all the Catholic healthcare CIOs saying, "Hey, does anybody have any experience with Salesforce?" And I get 3 or 4 responses. Yeah, we use them. It's great. We used them here. It was great. Here it wasn't so great. So we get that honest broker feedback from the community, and we rely on that pretty heavily. I will say this. My business lives on social media. CIOs do not live on social media. We do not have time to do social media. I know your marketing teams are out there putting stuff on social media, and they should. But at the end of the day, the larger health system CIOs just don't have time to get out on social media. So where else do we get information? Events like the ones we put on is other places to get information. Class within healthcare is the equivalent of like a Gartner. Gartner rates a lot of stuff. Class rates it in healthcare. And so we could read those kinds of things. I had a subscription to Gartner while I was there, and it was specifically for that purpose. I don't know if I've given you a lot of answers to that question.
Yeah.
How do I stay current?
Well, one thing that you mentioned that I want to dive into is you said there's vendors and there are partners, but when you said partners, you mentioned a couple companies, right? They're third-party companies like Dell and Cisco that are selling to you. So what separates a vendor from a partner in your experience?
They are immersed in my problems, right? So Dell was on site because, they were running, I don't know, $2 to $3 million a month through our business. And so they knew the problems I was having. They were a reliable vendor. They got stuff done, which is what made them a partner. They would do, you remember Barbara. Barbara was great. I'd go into her office and I'd say, "Hey, do you guys have a VNA?" She goes, "We do. You don't want it." And I'd be like, "Great. I appreciate that." Because she had a number to hit because they had split it, the services and products. So she was the product person. She's like, "Yeah, you don't want the one we sell, but I can tell you what the competitors are. I can connect you with some of our clients." She was always incredibly helpful. So it's somebody who really understands our problem set, is an honest broker of information. And from time to time, they side with me versus siding with, I would say in that case, versus chasing the paycheck. And so, and there was a couple of those. You started off as a vendor. Like I didn't know sales. I mean, I knew of Salesforce obviously, but I didn't know Salesforce from Adam. And so you're starting from the vendor side. You became a partner, but that takes time. You have to earn your stripes, and your solution has to do what you say it's going to do, and you have to get along with my team in the process. If you're able to pull that trifecta off, sell me on the solution to solve a problem, get along with my team, help me with the internal sale, you become a partner.
Well, in all due respect to you, you gave us the sponsorship, which helped us be a better partner. You said talk to David, talk to Mike Jardine after we had sent a lot and had a lot of correspondence beforehand. But once you were okay, I trust this guy, then you delegated, and that made a big difference in understanding and learning your business from inside out versus the outside in.
Yeah, but here's the important thing to know. So I gave you to a VP. I gave you to David. And David's one of my favorite people in the world, still is one of my favorite people in the world. But he resented from the minute I said, David, you're going to meet with this guy. He's got a solution to this problem. He resented it for two reasons. One is it sort of communicated that I didn't trust him to find a solution. And then the second thing it communicated was I didn't value his time. Because so many times I give them somebody and it doesn't go anywhere. And he's just like, oh gosh, what are you doing? Like, stop, like, just let me do my job. So he resented it from the get-go. So you start behind the eight ball. The fact that you were able to overcome that with David, develop that relationship, recognize that you still had to sell David. I mean, to a certain extent, I did sponsor, but David could have killed that as well. I mean, he could have come back to me and said, yeah, he could have done a couple things. He could come back to me and said, yeah, the sales rep's a knucklehead. I like Salesforce, but whatever. He could have come back to me and said, hey, the solution doesn't do what it says, just because he resented the way you came across. You had to sell him. And the fact that he came back to me a fan of the solution and a fan of you, solved two of my problems. One is I didn't look like, you made me look good to David. Because again, I have to stick and move. I have to keep moving down these problem sets. And I tell you, one out of every 5 times I gave something to my VPs, somebody screwed it up. The product didn't do what they said they promised it was going to do. The sales rep didn't follow through. The sales rep felt slighted because I gave him to a VP instead of dealing with me directly. Whatever it happens to be, they just didn't take it to the next. That is the next step. I gave you David. He's the operational leader of that solution. Run with it.
I love that you're saying that, because I think that when people get delegated, oftentimes they're taking a smug attitude. Well, your CIO told me to talk to you, versus treating it as its own sale. And that's a huge mistake, as you're elaborating on.
Yeah.
David became the champion. David became the sponsor in going to the events and going to Dreamforce and going to all of the details before we met you. In fact, I'll tell you one thing about David. This is a funny story. Before we did our big presentation where Naz came down, the product head, I had dinner with David that night and showed him our deck of what we were going to set. And he's like, Ian, you gotta redo this thing. Bill's gonna pardon my language, but he's gonna shit all over it. And he told us that. And I'm like, what do you mean? We worked so hard on this. We've been working for weeks on this thing. He's like, Bill's a visual guy. He likes big images. He likes bullets. You have text everywhere. You need to tell a story. And he coached us. And the next day we came and presented, and we got great feedback after that. But we empowered him by saying, let's do a first look. Let's go and make sure the solution works. Let's get it ready for Bill. Let's demo it, right? So I think that is really important to have kind of a right-hand person that you trust, or an executive trust, that also has power and is empowered to be able to make their own decision.
Can I piggyback on that for a minute? When I see people in front of me with anything more than 10 slides and it's all bullet points, I assume they don't know their product. Like, first of all, you shouldn't need a deck. Second of all, if you're going to use a deck, it shouldn't be crib notes for you to tell me what your product does. Like, you know what your product does. You're going to tell me what your product does. I'm not going to read it and have you tell me exactly what's on that slide deck. That's a waste of my time. Like, show me it working or something. Do something visual. That I have. Look, the good news is I'm in sales now. I have to get these CIOs to come to my events. I have to get these CIOs to recommend my show to their staff. I'm in that boat. And I use a deck like zero, like never. You have to have a story. And my story is real simple. Leaders in isolation are sure to fail. And they go, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, you ever feel lonely as a leader? You ever feel like there's no one to talk to? Nobody who understands you? You don't have a group of people that you can lean on and learn from when you're at that time when you really need them? Did you go into the pandemic and wonder, who the heck can I call? And by the time I'm done saying that, and that was less than 1 minute, they're all like, yeah, when's your next event?
I want you to come work with me. Sounds like a great pitch for the community here, because that's the same thing we tell sellers. It's like they feel alone in their company without their boss's support. It's the same principle, different audience. Love it.
And I would flip it on its so a lot of people are like, well, I need to know my product. I would say you need to own the problem. Like when they think about the problem, when they feel alone as a leader, I want them to think, Bill Russell, I should call Bill. I should email Bill. Bill knows, he can connect me with somebody who knows. I get so many emails now from CIOs saying, hey, do you know anybody who has gone through this? Yesterday, I got a call from a CIO who just lost his job. And he said, hey, I know you went through this. Can you help me to find my next job? It's not a service we offer. It's not whatever, but that's great. That's what he thought, and I'm going to help him. But that's what he thought. Own your problem is the first thing. And then the second thing is to know your product. But owning the problem, like when you come into a CIO and you communicate that you really understand the problem set that they are dealing with, you have elevated yourself way above the rest of the sales reps in the industry. Because if you can communicate in a way that shows empathy for me, that understands the problem the way I'm feeling this problem, and you sort of set yourself up as I'm an expert on this problem, I'm going to listen to you. I'll give you 10 minutes to read the baseball scores. I mean, at that point, you're speaking my language. I used to have a mind map. And if I showed you the mind map, it would scare you. A CIO mind map. It had so many lines, so many things on it, and that kind of stuff. And if you're wondering what a CIO is thinking at any given time, you can't know what they're thinking at any given time, because they have to solve a myriad of problems. The biggest thing they're thinking about today, the Chevron ruling from the Supreme Court. And you're like, what does that have to do with healthcare? Has a lot to do with healthcare. Actually, has a lot to do with all of us. But it changes the way that laws are going to be enforced that come through, and it's a highly regulated industry. So they're going, oh crap, I need to do something about this. And to validate that, I just interviewed a CIO, and I said to him, I'm like, hey, what do you think of the Chevron ruling? He's like, oh my gosh, there's a big. We were talking about this all day today. I'm like, yes, exactly. But you go in there and think his biggest problem is his data center, or his biggest problem is his CRM or his ERP. Not today. It might, but it's one of the 150 problems that he needs to solve. And if you happen to catch him, this is your story with your emails. You happen to hit me at a time where I'm like, we have a problem. It probably wasn't a top of mind problem, but your emails got it to be a top of mind problem. I'm like, yeah, that's a nagging problem. This guy seems to have some credibility. And if nothing else, he's the most persistent individual I've ever met. Okay, prove it. I think my email to you was just prove it, right? Wasn't that the response?
It was very short. I think I wrote you an essay and you wrote me one line and like, tell me more. How long does it take? Like, give me detail. And I literally had to dig up all the details and figure it out. Like how long to implement, what's your license model? You were I think 2 lines might have been the longest email you sent me.
Because you get 250 emails a day and 100 of those are internal, and you have to respond as a CIO. There's like 50% of those internal ones you have to respond to. And so you were part of the other that I'm looking at. And I'm like, I may not have even read your first 5. And then the 6th one caught my attention. Hey, we're doing this for another health system. Okay. Like referral sales is the strongest thing in healthcare. Like if you tell me you're doing it for another health system, I think that was the email. It was like you had done something for another health system. I'm like,
it was Stanford Medical, and we had implemented a chatter solution where it was collaborating all the nurses and doctors. And I shared that story with you, and it was them going live and launching it to their staff, their employees. And I sent you that video, and I said, here's what we're doing, Sam. And this was after, this is my 6th email to you, after you didn't respond. I don't know if you remember this, but you got invited to have lunch with Mark Benioff in Spago with Wolfgang Puck privately hosting a luncheon. And you're like, didn't even, no response.
Dude, I was invited to Jay Leno's garage, for heaven's sake. I've been invited to the Masters. I've been invited to, that stuff is cool and interesting, and it works for some CIOs. I'm not going to say it doesn't. David Baker loves being with Mark Benioff. If he is your client, get him in front of Mark Benioff. And he took pictures every time he's with him. He takes a picture with him and he texts it to me. Hey, I'm with Benioff. And I'm like, okay, that's great. I turned down Jay Leno. I turned down a ton of that stuff. You just don't have time to do it all. But where I lived, I had a problem. You solved it for Stanford. And I'm like, okay, tell me more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's an important lesson is sometimes what you start with, you have to mix up. You have to change the value proposition. And secondly, share what their peers are doing. So let's kind of dive in. You mentioned 250 emails, and they're so busy with all these projects. How does a seller get their message or voice even heard to the CIO in 2024 when it's just noisier than ever?
It's hard. It's harder now than it was before. Microsoft keeps introducing features that are going to block your emails. That's the biggest challenge you have right now. Actually, it's the reason our business is booming. It's so if you have Outlook on your Apple iPhone, it has focused emails and whatever the other one is, non-focused, whatever it is. They now have come up with 4 categories, and one of them is essentially, this is a solicitation. So, how you write your emails is really important. It cannot come across as a solicitation. It has to come across as, somebody and that kind of stuff. I will tell you, we have to work with health systems to get our domain unblocked. Like CIOs will say to me, why am I not getting your emails? I'm like, that's your problem, not my problem. I'm like, that's on your end. And they'll call me back and say, oh, yeah, you were being blocked. I'm like, why was I being blocked? It's like the spam filters now are just AI generated. It's like, that kind of stuff. So you have to, if you send 5 emails and you don't hear anything, you definitely do want to send the 6th email, but you may want to try to verify whether somebody, like if you have a friendly within that organization, send them an email and see if they get it. And if they get it, then you're probably not blocked at that level. Then the CIO is probably not responding, but just verify that, hey, email is getting through to this, because that's changed. With that being said, again, I love the concept of owning the problem. We work with it's something like to the effect of, we work with a lot of health systems that have a similar problem, that have similar problems, and you talk about the problem and really accentuate the problem. If you gave me like an email to send, I would talk about the problem for a while and say, I'm going to be in your area over the next week or so. I'd love to stop by and just have a 15-minute conversation about this. And look, I mean, I do this with CIOs. Whenever we're doing a city tour in a city, like the HCA CIO, newly appointed CIO, I shot him a note and said, hey, you got 15 minutes, love to, it's essentially, we do this is what we do because we believe leaders in isolation are sure to fail, blah, 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 blah. Do you have 15 minutes for me? He said, I can do better than that. I got 30 minutes for you. So, okay, great. So I don't know. There's better people probably to talk to than me about crafting a great email.
I think you go to the top and you speak their language. I mean, it's fairly simple, but fundamentally, I think fundamentally you're nailing it. You're nailing it. And the fact you're selling, I think, is pretty awesome. But you talk about that's what builds the credibility and trust. You say, hey, I work with people exactly like you, and here's some of the top challenges, and I'd love to chat with you and see if it's something that you're facing. And try to help.
And the referral stuff helps as well. Yeah, hey, we're working with Neil Patel at Vanderbilt. We're working with Jack at LifePoint. We're working, and so we're able to give him a couple of referrals, and he goes, "I know both of those people. I'd love to sit down with you."
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. So, I'm curious. Once you have before I get into it, what as far as like.
You told me what we were going to talk about, and you're like all over the place. Like you haven't even hit on most of the stuff we were going to talk about. But we'll keep going. This is great.
How do you sort? I like to free flow it based on what you're saying. So how do you source vendors? So the cold calling approach is really hard, and you're talking about referrals. Let's say you want a new solution. What is the normal kind of go-to process where you would find vendors?
Yeah, and this is the secret handshake in healthcare. You just need to know is there. Look, you can't afford to have failed implementations in healthcare. The first thing we do is we shoot a note out to our peers, and you said, "Hey, Stanford, I know the CIO at Stanford. I can easily shoot him a note." Now I didn't, but I could have shot him a note right then and said, "Hey, are you working with these guys? And what would you?" what would you recommend and that kind of stuff. We source vendors a lot from each other. I had a call this morning with two CIOs and together, and one of them's having a problem with their imaging system, and they it became obvious to me that they had a half-hour call yesterday where the one was just asking him what they did around imaging. That is so common. That is the number one way that healthcare organizations source. Second way is the Gartners and the classes of this world is the other way they'll source. The events. I know some CIOs that will go booth to booth, or at least they'll identify a handful of booths they want to hit while they're at a conference. So I'm not gonna discount that. I hate them, but I'm not gonna discount it because I know some CIOs that appreciate the efficiency of being able to go to 3 or 5 or 6 booths very quickly and look at different solutions side by side. Another way that we get sourced, hey, you don't only have to sell to the CIO. Another way we get sourced is a doctor walks into our office, or a programmer walks into our office, or an architect walks into our office and says, hey, we've got to look at MuleSoft. And we have a data problem, and we have an interoperability problem. We can't get the data from here to here. And if we were to use this solution, we're going to be able to, this is going to cut down. Again, what they're going to communicate to me is solving problems. It's going to make us more efficient. We're not going to use much staff. We're going to be able to bring on more physician practices. And the more they talk in terms of problems, I'm going, yeah, by all means, bring them in. Like if they're going to solve those 3 problems for us, yeah, let's talk to them tomorrow.
So is that something that, given it sounds like the CIO in a shared service role is really supporting so many different groups, the cafeteria, the imaging group, is the CIO mostly responding to the internal customers and what they need as far as innovative projects, or are they coming and bringing their own ideas and kind of driving things and convincing the business they need to do something different?
All right. So I have a talk I give, the 5 types of healthcare CIOs. But the answer to that is yes. There are CIOs that have a vision of where they're going to take some things, and they are looking for some solutions. But generally, this is how it was described to me. A healthcare IT organization is like a football team, has offense, defense, and special teams. The defense is exactly what you think it is. It's the infrastructure, it's the security, it's like, just keep it running. It's defensive kind of stuff, just keep it running. The offensive stuff is, the new ERP, the new CRM, the new whatever. This is, we're going to be able to care for patients, deliver quality. This is moving the organization forward. The special teams is probably a makeup of both defensive and offensive, but that's where you get to play around and say, we're going to try to do something we've never done before. We're going to try to care for patients out of their home. we're going to try to implement a new workflow so that people are never asked for their information more than once they've entered a St. Joe's health system. We're going to try to do away with every clipboard that has ever been handed out at St. Joe's. That's that group that's sitting over there, that it's not part of the normal run stuff that's going to get done by the offense and defense. And you just have to create these, again, special teams. And sometimes those are, part of the organization, part of IT, part of, some external consulting. And you're like, all right, let's solve this specific problem. And, and that's pretty accurate to how things happen. So I'll tell you the one thing I will say while we're on this, close to this topic, which is you have to understand budget cycles. If I rattle off your top 10 clients and you can't tell me what their budget cycle is, that's a problem. Because in healthcare, if I'm ahead of a budget cycle and I'm able to put it into the normal flow of conversation, and then the budget is allocated, then essentially, if you come to me at any time after that point, I can get a deal done pretty quickly. But if you come to me post budget cycle, then I either have to find money, which is hard to do. It's really hard to do today. It was hard to do when I was there. It's almost impossible today. Or I have to go up and ask for additional money. And in order to ask for additional money, they're either going to want a less than 1 year ROI, or they're going to want it to solve a very acute problem. Otherwise, it can wait. It can wait until the next budget cycle. So you're like, this is so important. You agree. It's really important. It's really whatever. It's like you're out of budget cycle. Like you missed the opportunity to talk to me. I don't remember the specific budget. I may have had some money. Actually, I did have some money because anyway, regardless, I don't want to tell that story. I can tell that story. I came in and asked for $1 billion when I became CIO. I need $1 billion over the next 3 years. And they gave it to me. So I had money.
Now, when you say that budget cycle, is it normally like an umbrella budget that you're allocating across different projects, or is it really, I think that was a pretty unique example. And I remember our negotiation and you kind of told me where we needed to be to even have a shot.
Yeah, but budgeting's changed too. So COVID changed things. The financial, supply chain, inflation has changed things. And the other thing that's happened is, I would say a third of all health systems have gone to, if you know the difference between waterfall and agile, they've gone to the equivalent of agile budgeting. And so instead of this annual budgeting process, about a third of the health systems have gone to this quarterly budgeting process, so that if there's something that does come up, it doesn't have to wait a full year. They're trying to be more nimble and that kind of stuff. It's important to know if that's the case, because now instead of having to wait a full year to get into that budget cycle, I might be able to get into quarterly budget cycles. And I've interviewed CIOs that have gone to that. Some like it, some don't, because you're you feel like you're on quicksand. Like you just never, it's never firm for a year. So anyway, I just know the budget cycle, know how organizations operate, sometimes they approve a problem. They say, this year we are going to solve communication with our, with this population. And it could be, an underserved population in a community. And we've approved a certain budget to solve this problem. And some of that is technology. And some of it will be about getting the data in the right place. Some of it will be about either texting that community or maybe standing up a call center to call that community. Sometimes problems get budgeted and sometimes specific technologies get budgeted. It's I don't know. It's hard to describe. And there's probably other things I'm just not thinking about right now.
Well, you're talking about kind of a blanket or an umbrella budget that if you fall into it, they could basically use money that's approved versus a process of, we budgeted for this specific piece of technology, but it's never we budgeted $5 million for Salesforce per se. It's $5 million for this CRM type project, which includes the people, the implementation, the licensing, right? Isn't that kind of the way it works?
Yeah. As a CIO, when I got my budget, we had annual budgeting, and when I got my budget, 3 months before I got my budget, I would task my team with finding at least as much in savings as they possibly could. And so, an example, they realigned a bunch of things in the data center, and we saved $600,000 over the course of the year, which was great. That was in operating. Now all of a sudden, I had $600,000 free to spend, and so good CIOs will figure out how to free up money. You need margin in order to operate, because something's going to break, something's going to not go well. You're going to want to move something forward. And then there's the horse trading that goes on. Like, you're working with the medical group and you're like, they don't have money for a new data thing, but you do. And you're sitting there going, hey, you know what, Kevin, I can help you out with that. That'll help the entire organization. I've got some extra money, and then, you're just horse trading.
Yeah. And if you're a power, you have to be having the conversations with people who have the ability to horse trade in the first place. I think that's a really important point that sellers miss.
Do you want to let them ask questions? Because we could probably talk for the next 3 hours.
I'll keep you on as long as you stay. One last question before, and then we'll open it up to the group. I want to leave at least 10 minutes. So you mentioned you left because of like stress, and you said we'd talk about it later. I want to give you a chance to kind of talk about lessons learned or what happened, and just give some context at that personal level.
It's taken me 6 years, but I'm finally telling this story in its entirety. And that's essentially, so we merged, Providence came down, we merged with Providence. I was with St. Joe's. Providence was a little larger. Providence was going to take over, and I had to go through all that work of integrating the organizations. It was a really highly stressful time, because, as you know, they come in and say merger of equals, which, can we all just say, is bullshit. There's no such thing. It's never happened in any industry. And I've been around long enough to know that it was. And it's like, here's the talk track. Here's what we want you saying to people. And I'm like, this is just killing me on the inside. And I started to act out. And things like being on a call with the CEO of Providence and him saying, I believe we should do this, and me saying, that's a stupid idea. Literally on the phone to the merging company's CEO. That's one example of just the dumb things I was doing over that time frame, like screaming for help. So that's one example. But I will say this: over the course of the 6 years I was there, 6 years, it was not healthy. I worked way too many hours. I was way too full of myself. Every vendor I meet now who said, "Oh, I worked with you at St. Joe's," my first reaction is to say, "I am so sorry," because I am not that person anymore. I was proud. I was arrogant. I literally thought you were laughing at my jokes because I was funny, and I now know that was not true. I thought you were taking me out to dinner because you enjoyed being with me. And I knew that wasn't true, because after I was let go, nobody called me. Not us. My phone stopped ringing. It was ringing every 5 minutes, and it went to no. I was looking forward to getting spam so that someone would email me during the week. It was that freaking lonely after I was let go. Now, the nice thing is they let me go and gave me a severance, and they let me go a week before the merger was finalized. So the umbrella story that I have told people for 5 years is, the merger went through and I left, which had the added benefit of being true. But at the end of the day, I was spent. Anyway, I did not, it was not good for my family. It was not good for me. And I don't think it was good for a lot of the people around me. They have gone on to do really good things, but it was a bad situation. So,
well, I will tell you right now, I was intimidated by you. I walked in and it was like, okay, I got to be on point, got to be sharp, and I will say it sounds like you're in a much better place, and you make your mess your message. So now you get to help people avoid the stress and the choices that you made. So it's helping a lot of people.
Leaders in isolation are sure to fail is my story.
Yeah,
so
I love it. I love it. Well, let's take some questions from the group. We have Romana, you have your hand up, so go ahead. I'm going to add Romana here so we could all see him.
Hey, Bill. Great interview. Thank you so much for the time that you gave us today. I wanted to take you back for a few minutes to your consulting stint prior to becoming the CIO. Can I ask you, as a consultant myself, how did you craft your offers? How did you think about how you present yourself as relevant and interesting to the CIO community?
It's interesting. First of all, I want to know, are you in a library or have you read all those books?
I can tell you I read 2 chapters before it qualified to be in my bookshelf. That's what I'll tell you.
Yeah. Well, and anyone who's in the publishing business will tell you that the publishers force people to even put books out of order to make sure the most interesting stuff is in the front of the book. So, because they know most people put them down. Anyway, consulting. Again, I think it's around owning the problem. Here's what we sold to St. Joe's at the time. I was with a firm. We were doing a turnaround of a firm, and we started a cloud consulting business back in 2008. We started a cloud consulting business, and it was to help organizations understand how the cloud could benefit them and how it could. At the time, we didn't know, so we just said, save you money, right? We now know that it doesn't save you money, but back then we said it saved them money. And so we tried to own that problem, which is your data center's changing. There's plenty of opportunities. You're not taking advantage of those opportunities. So we were sort of, the problem we were trying to own is technology is changing pretty rapidly. You're going to get left behind, and you're not going to be able to take advantage of these new architectures. And the examples we gave were things like, do you know how easy it is to do things at home? Like, you can share a file with your grandmother, but then you go to work and you try to share a file with your person in the cube next to you, and you can't figure out how to do it. And everyone in the room's going, yeah, my gosh, it's like impossible. Or even worse, you're a doctor and you want to share something with somebody outside your organization, and you're like, you can't even do that. Like, you can't send it in an email. It's too big. You can't, they're sitting there going, yeah. I'm like, internet architecture allows you to do that. And it's all built on cloud architecture, cloud technologies. So I give you that to say, that's an example of, first of all, speaking their language. At some point, they have to be nodding their head. You have to be talking about their problem, and they have to be going, yes, that's it. Yes, you get me. You understand. I hate IT. I can't share a file. And as the outside consultant, it's okay because you're saying to IT, yeah, IT is giving you the best of what we have today. We're talking about what's next, and we're going to help you to get there. And so that was how we pitched that specific one. And that was interesting too, because we got in front of the CIO would not give us the time of day. We got to the CEO, and we started talking to the CEO about how technology is changing, and she was kind of insecure about that. She's like, I know it is, and my IT organization's a black hole. Like, I don't know what they're spending money on, but we can't do anything. Every time I go to ask to do something, we can't do it. So again, this is back in 2012, 2011. So different time. How would I have
no idea.
Yeah. So anyway, hopefully that gives you an idea of how we pitched that.
Oh, of course. Thank you.
Perfect. We have Eric Cullen next. I'm going to pin you, Eric. Good to see you again. I worked with Eric over at Salesforce, so great to see you coming full circle. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, no, thanks, Bill. Thanks for jumping on here. It's always interesting to get a CIO's take on how to sell to them. So being at Salesforce and now I'm with Databricks, and AI and ML is huge, right? And everyone in leadership is beating the drum that get to the CIO, talk to the CIO. They want to know everything they can about AI and ML. So you're getting 35 vendors a day reaching out to have a conversation about machine learning and AI and get your, what are you thinking about, right? Like, how many times can you have that conversation before you just turn it off and be like, look, I have Accenture or I have Deloitte already. I don't need to talk to you.
Just listen to my podcast and you will hear the CIOs apologize to me when they mention AI. They will say, AI has potential. I'm sorry I have to talk about it. They apologize to me. I just had this conversation and I said, well, I know why they're apologizing, because they're getting inundated with it. They feel the world is getting inundated with it. Let me tell you how people are thinking about AI and ML. If that's what you're going in to talk about, you're talking about the wrong thing. You're talking about a feature. It's a feature. That's how they see it. It's showing up on their desktop. It's showing up in every Microsoft product. It's showing up in every Google product. It's showing up in Epic. It's showing up everywhere. It's showing up in analytics tools, and it's a feature. Like and your feature is not all that different from everybody else's feature. Own the problem. What's the problem you're trying to solve? And if you're in the data world, the problem you're trying to solve for an academic medical center is your data is strewn all over the place. We've got to bring it in. We've got to put governance around it. We've got to put definitions around the terms. We've got to, bring your metadata together and organize that so that you guys can control that data, secure that data, and still do the research that you want to do in order to be an effective research institution. If it's an IDN, what they're worried about is, how do they build out clinically integrated networks? How do they deliver care at the edge? How do they enable nurses that are going into homes? Like how do they move that data around? And what data do they actually move? And as they're moving that data, how is it secure and how is it relevant? A lot of times doctors and nurses are complaining about the fact they have too much data. Stop giving me all the freaking data. I don't care that they weighed in 65 times. I just need to know a trend. Like, just boil it down. So I would say own the problem is what I would want to, if I was in the data world, I'd want to know the problems that they're dealing with, and I want to own that problem. And then say, I know you're tired of hearing about AI and ML. Just know we are on the cutting edge with this stuff. We are utilizing it in the background. Here's a couple of things we're doing with it. But I really want to talk about how we can solve some of the things that you're challenged with right now. Their challenge is not, can I bring in more AI?
Right. Yeah.
They do not care.
Okay. No, thank you.
Sure.
Let's take Meg next. Go ahead, Meg.
Thanks. Hi, Bill. You might have just answered this question, but I'm still going to ask anyways. You said something that really stuck out about how before, when you were at St. Joe's, you were a cranky CIO. I know that you probably had so many vendors come to visit you, and I actually have a very cranky CIO that I am working with. And what, from your experience, and he too, same size organization, has thousands of emails a day. When vendors would come in and they give you that 30-minute, 15-minute pitch, and maybe it is just owning the problem, what was something that they would say or demonstrate to you that would honestly kind of just ease your pain or ease your mood to make you more receptive to what they have to say, or less cranky, I guess, if you will?
Are you a vendor or a partner at this point? Are you already in there and they're using your solution, or are you trying to get in there to be a solution for them?
So I'm at Gartner, and his team uses Gartner, but he does not. And I'm trying, so we're a partner to his team, trying to get him a seat.
Yeah, I would. Gartner, boy, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I
was happy though when you talked about it.
Well, the only time I looked at our Gartner contract was when I was trying to do cost reductions, and I would say, "I'm cutting this," and then the team would come to me and go, "You can't cut it." Like, why can't I cut it? It's this much money, and I never use it. They're like, "We use it all the time."
That's my exact situation. My exact situation. He wants to cut it every year, but the team begs for it, and I'm trying to get him on the Gartner bandwagon. And I've got a 30-minute pitch with him, which is why I want to pick your brain about how to make him happy and not cranky.
Well, so I will go back to know who your friendlies are in the industry. Like William Walders loves Gartner. William Walders is at some health system in Tampa. Can't remember what it is. But there's going to be a bunch of friendlies that you have. It would be great. I mean, the best would be if William would go on the sales call with you, because he'll sit there and talk to William for 10 minutes and he'll go, yeah, I love going to the Gartner conference every year because it gives me an outside perspective. It's not healthcare only. It's really, anyway, it gives you a perspective of what the rest of the industries are doing around this. And sometimes that's what healthcare needs. It needs that other perspective. I'm not sure there's an answer to your problem. I mean, if you had 15 minutes with him, what is the most important thing you want him to know or understand about Gartner?
Definitely the value that we deliver to his team. I mean, his team says it to him, but we've been a partner for 4 years. This is the first time I'm in front of him, and he spends close to $1 million, which is heavy for Gartner. So, I mean, his team can say it. I can say it until I'm blue in the face, but I mean, he's kind of a loose cannon. So that's why when you said that you might have been intimidating before, as a sales rep, it'd be awesome to know, like, hey, like if any of these sales reps out of your 6 years came in, do you remember one where you were like, that's the rep that made me feel better? Or like, that's the rep that made me feel at ease?
Yeah. Well, again, understanding their problem is really important. I played golf with a CIO a month ago, and he's been given a $75 million cost reduction to hit in his health system. And they're making cuts that on the surface would make no sense whatsoever. But he's been given a $75 million number to hit. I know another one that's been given a $100 million number to hit. That's a completely different type of thing. So really understanding their problem set and what they're again, owning that problem. And if somebody's been given, if I give you, hey, I need you to cut, $3,000 a month out of your budget. Mm-hmm. And then I come in and say, hey, I got this new vacuum cleaner. You need it. It's the most amazing thing ever. It's going to clean better than anything. You're going to look at me like, you have no idea where I live and what I'm dealing with. I don't know how you get that information. Right. I will say this. It amazes me how few salespeople listen to my podcast. And this isn't a pitch for my podcast. It's a pitch for selling effectively. If you're calling on somebody and they've done a Becker's interview, they've been interviewed on my podcast, they've been interviewed on somebody else's podcast, you should have consumed all of that before you even step foot in that office. Because sometimes they will just say, yeah, this is a really tough time for the industry. They'll couch it in. If they're not going to talk about themselves specifically, they'll say, yeah, this is a really tough time for the industry. There's a lot of pressure on margins, and essentially what they're saying is that's their headspace. That's where they're living right now. Mm-hmm. And now you're going in there and saying, no, the $1 million is worth it.
Yeah.
And my question to you would be, and gosh, Ian will tell you this, I would be this frank. I'd look at you and say, fine, it's worth it. Prove it. Prove to me it's worth it. How did it return $1 million to me last year?
Yeah, fair. So smart to go in with the ROI stories, definitely.
Well, if that's where they're living, if that's where they're living today, yes. But if some people live in the innovation space, and if that person lives in the innovation space, you could talk innovation. But my guess, if they're in healthcare right now, they're living in the cost reduction world.
Perfect. Bill, I think we are right at time, Meg. This is a great discussion. Bill, my last question is, if people want to follow along, what's the best place? Where can they learn more about what CIOs care about, healthcare? I recommended your podcast to someone yesterday because they only sell the healthcare. I said, you need to be an expert. So I'm glad you're reiterating that advice. But where can people follow you or connect with you?
Just at our website, thisweekhealth.com. It's important to note we have decided to only focus on healthcare providers. Our message is completely for healthcare providers. If you're in healthcare, life sciences, we don't talk to those people. If you're in the payer world, we touch on it, but we don't really live in that world. Healthcare providers. And so if you're interested in that kind of stuff, thisweekhealth.com has podcasts. I now have 2 other former CIOs who I convinced to come do this with me. Suckers. Anyway, but no, it's great, and we're building out these communities. I'll tell you the other thing we do now is we do these 229 groups. 229 stands for February 29th of 2020 was the first reported case of COVID to the CDC. And around that time, my phone started ringing, and people were like, hey, what's Vanderbilt doing for this? What's UCLA doing? And I'm like, what are you calling me for? Call Neil, call Mike, call them directly. They're like, I don't know them. They're on stage. They're interviewed by somebody else. I don't know them. I'm like, all right, well, we're going to have to fix that. So we started these groups. There are 10 to 15 people in a room, roundtable discussion for 2.5 days. And we have 7 partners who sit in those rooms with those CIOs. And you want to talk about, it's so fun. They're like, I can't find the CIO anymore. He lives in Florida, but the health system's headquartered in North Carolina. How do we even find them anymore? And so our events are loaded with people. We have story after story. One of the companies is a small startup, and they've added $42 million to their pipeline as a result of coming to the events, because you're having lunch with them, you're having dinner with them over 2.5 days, you're meeting their spouse. It's like shooting ducks in the barrel. At least getting the meetings is shooting ducks in the barrel. What you do in those meetings, talk to Ian. He'll tell you what to do once you get in the door. So
it's a great segue, and I'm excited to come on your podcast next and talk about the sales side and the other side, so which you're actually doing now. So I think it'll be very relevant.
Yeah, and I'm gonna make you confess your stuff in front of everybody as well. How I made your life so hard that you also struggled personally.
I don't know if you want me to tell those stories about what we had to put in the contract and all kinds of other stuff. We can go.
Oh man.
Last thing. We literally, here's a great story. We had to, we invited Bill to the exec summit at Dreamforce, and it just so happened that he got invited to Mark Benioff's. It was a private party, and the entertainment was Jerry Seinfeld and Tony Bennett. So you're not going to top that for any event anywhere. And I remember that was left an impact.
We walked into that room, and there was 10 drink glasses in front of me. And I remember David Baker leaning over to me, because he grew up on the rough side of tracks, and he sort of looked at me and goes, do you know what these 10 glasses are for? I'm like, I don't know, but I think we're going to find out. It's like, and they just kept bringing stuff and pouring stuff in. It was the most extravagant thing I've ever seen in my life, but it was amazing.
I love it. Well, we ended up working together, so it was all for good cause, and here we are. Bill, I can't thank you enough for sharing your insights, and I'm looking forward to supporting you and in your community in whatever capacity I can. And thank you again for coming on. Hope everyone has a great day. Thanks for all your questions, and we'll see you next month for the next month's Fireside Chat. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.